She was a 90-year-old grandmother about to teach a ruthless biker gang why you should never judge someone by their age. What happened next would send shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Blood trickled down Margaret Thompson's arm as the Shadow Viper's leader pressed a knife against her throat. The fluorescent lights of Mike's gas station flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the dozen bikers who had surrounded her. Their leather vests bore patches of skulls and death, their eyes hungry for violence. "Last chance, old woman," Havoc growled, his breath hot against her ear. "Tell us where the money is, or we'll show you what real pain feels like." But Peggy Thompson didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't show an ounce of fear, because while they saw a fragile grandmother in a floral dress, they had no idea they were threatening one of Vietnam's most legendary combat pilots, the woman who'd pulled 30 wounded soldiers from behind enemy lines in a burning helicopter while taking heavy fire. "You boys want to know what real pain feels like?" Peggy's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Her fingers moved slowly toward her phone. "Let me introduce you to some old friends who can teach you." The call she was about to make would unleash a force so powerful it would shake the criminal underworld to its core. But not even Peggy could have predicted the shocking chain of events that would follow, or how many lives would be changed forever by what was about to unfold. Havoc pressed the blade harder, drawing another thin line of blood. "No one's coming to save you, Grandma. This is Shadow Viper territory now." Peggy's smile was cold as Arctic ice. "Son, I've faced better men than you in worse places than this, and every single one of them learned the same lesson the hard way." The phone rang once, twice, then a gruff voice answered, "Morrison." "Jack." Peggy's voice was calm as she locked eyes with Havoc. "Remember Quang Tri? The night you said you owed me your life. Time to pay that debt?" There was a moment of silence on the line. Then Colonel Jack Iron Jack Morrison's voice turned to pure granite. "What's your location?" "Mike's gas station." "And Jack?" "Bring everyone." Havoc's laughter died in his throat as the distant sound of motorcycles filled the air. Not the chaotic roar of street thugs, but the synchronized thunder of military precision. The Shadow Vipers were about to learn what happens when you threaten someone who'd spent their life pulling heroes out of hell. But this was just the beginning, because what would unfold over the next 48 hours would become a legend in the criminal underworld, a story of vengeance, redemption, and the kind of courage that doesn't fade with age. The war for Riverstone was about to begin, and blood would be spilled before the sun rose again. The ground trembled as 50 Harley-Davidsons thundered into Mike's gas station, their chrome gleaming like war machines under the fluorescent lights. Each rider wore combat medals that spoke of battles fought in jungles and deserts, men who'd stared death in the face and didn't blink. Havoc's knife hand trembled slightly as Iron Jack Morrison dismounted his bike. The legendary veteran's face was a roadmap of scars, his eyes burning with the kind of cold fury that could only come from decades of combat. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of countless battles. "Take your hand off her, now!" But Havoc, drunk on pride and fear, made the worst mistake of his life. He pressed the blade harder against Peggy's throat. "Back off, old man, or I'll..." What happened next would be whispered about in biker bars for years to come. Peggy Thompson, the woman they dismissed as a helpless grandmother, moved with lightning speed. Her elbow crushed into Havoc's solar plexus. Her other hand twisted the knife away with military precision. Before anyone could blink, the Shadow Viper's leader was on his knees, gasping for air, his own blade pressed against his throat. "In 68, Peggy's voice carried across the suddenly silent lot. "I flew into heavy fire to save Jack and his unit. Took 3 rounds through the cockpit, but I didn't flinch then." She pressed the blade just enough to draw blood. "And I'm not flinching now." The Shadow Vipers reached for their weapons, but froze as 50 veteran bikers drew their own. This wasn't their usual street fight. These were combat-hardened soldiers who'd fought in the world's worst hellholes. "You boys want to see what real warriors look like?" Iron Jack's voice was deadly quiet. "Or do you want to learn what happens when you threaten one of our own?" But before anyone could move, the night exploded with new tension. Multiple SUVs with tinted windows screeched into the lot. The cartel had arrived. "This isn't just about your little gang anymore," a smooth voice called out as men in expensive suits emerged, automatic weapons glinting. The Shadow Vipers work for us now, and we can't have some veterans disrupting our business." Peggy's eyes narrowed as she recognized the implications. This wasn't just about local thugs anymore. The Shadow Vipers had sold their souls to something far more dangerous. Iron Jack's hand moved to his own weapon. "Peggy, give the word. My men are ready." But Peggy Thompson saw something nobody else did. This wasn't just a chance for revenge. It was an opportunity to tear out the root of evil that had infected her town. Her next words would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the criminal underworld to its foundation. "Call them," she said to Havoc, her voice cold as winter steel. "Call every friend, every ally, every dirty cop on your payroll, because after tonight, there won't be a single corner of this town left for criminals to hide." The cartel leader's laugh was silk over steel. "You have no idea what you're starting, old woman." Peggy's smile was terrifying in its calmness. "No, son, you have no idea what I'm finishing." Dawn painted the sky blood red as Riverstone transformed into a war zone. The cartel had called in professional mercenaries, cold-eyed killers who set up sniper nests in abandoned buildings. The Shadow Vipers, desperate to save face, had summoned every affiliated gang within 100 miles. But they had all underestimated what one 90-year-old veteran was willing to risk to save her town. "They've got explosives," Sarah Chen, Peggy's former combat medic, reported grimly. Security cameras showed cartel men unloading enough firepower to level half of Riverstone. Military grade. "They're planning to burn the town down if they can't control it." Iron Jack's face hardened. "We need to evacuate." "No." Peggy's voice cut through the command center like a blade. She stood at the map table, her fingers tracing strategic points with the same precision she'd used to plot rescue missions in Vietnam. "That's exactly what they expect. But I didn't spend 40 years in this town to watch it fall to thugs and criminals." She turned to address the gathered veterans, her eyes burning with a fire that had never died since her combat days. "They think they're fighting for territory. We're fighting for home." The radio crackled. Havoc's voice edged with desperation. "Last chance, Thompson. Surrender now, or we start taking hostages. Maybe we'll start with that diner you love so much." But Peggy was already moving, her mind racing 3 steps ahead. "Sarah, show them what we found." Sarah Chen pulled up files on the main screen. Banking records, shell companies, political bribes. "We've been gathering evidence for months," she announced. "Every corrupt cop, every bought politician, every dirty deal. One phone call and it all goes to the FBI." The cartel leader's voice cut through on all frequencies. "You think the law can touch us? We own this state." "Maybe," Peggy replied, her smile terrible in its certainty. "But you don't own us." What happened next would become legend. Simultaneously across Riverstone, hidden veterans emerged from deep cover. They'd infiltrated every level of the cartel's operation, gathered evidence, and waited for this moment. Police sirens wailed as honest cops, fed intelligence by Peggy's network, moved on corrupt officers. Federal agents, coordinated by Sarah Chen, breached cartel's safe houses. But the real shock came from within the Shadow Vipers themselves. Diesel, Havoc's trusted lieutenant, stepped forward, ripping off his gang patches. "I fought in Iraq," he announced, his voice carrying across the radio frequencies. "Forgot what honor meant until this woman reminded me. We're done being thugs." One by one, other Shadow Vipers followed suit, choosing redemption over destruction. The cartel's mercenaries, reading the shifting winds, began to withdraw. Professional killers knew when a cause was lost, but Havoc, driven mad by the collapse of his empire, made one final, desperate move. He aimed a grenade launcher at the Veterans Command Center, screaming about respect and fear. What he didn't see was Peggy Thompson, the Angel of Quang Tri, making her final approach. "Some people think bravery is about not feeling fear." Peggy's voice was steady as she faced Havoc, standing between him and everything she loved. "But real courage, it's about what you do when you're terrified." The grenade launcher trembled in Havoc's hands. Behind him, his empire was crumbling. Federal agents led cartel members away in handcuffs. Former Shadow Vipers were helping veterans secure the town. His mercenaries had abandoned him. All that remained was his rage. "You ruined everything," he screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "No, son." Peggy took a step forward, her eyes holding his with the same unwavering courage that had carried her through countless rescue missions. "I gave you a chance to be better. You just weren't brave enough to take it." The next few seconds would be seared into Riverstone's memory forever. As Havoc pulled the trigger, Diesel tackled him from behind. The grenade launched high, arcing toward the town's crowded center. Without hesitation, Peggy Thompson moved like she was 30 years younger, diving for the fallen grenade launcher. In one fluid motion, learned from decades of combat flying, she fired a second grenade. The explosion lit up the morning sky as the two projectiles collided safely above the town. When the smoke cleared, Havoc lay sobbing on the ground, his last attempt at vengeance defeated by the very people he'd tried to destroy. But what happened next would shock everyone. Peggy knelt beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "In Vietnam, I learned something important. The hardest person to forgive is yourself, but it's never too late to change." She turned to address the gathered crowd, veterans, reformed gang members, townspeople who'd found their courage. Riverstone isn't just a place, it's a promise. A promise that darkness doesn't win, that redemption is possible, that real strength comes from protecting others, not terrorizing them. One by one, the remaining Shadow Vipers laid down their weapons. The cartel's influence was broken. The corrupt politicians would face justice. But more importantly, something extraordinary had happened in Riverstone. A town had rediscovered its soul. Diesel, still wearing his gang tattoos but now standing with the veterans, summed it up best. She didn't just save the town. She saved us from ourselves. 1 year later, Riverstone had transformed. Former gang members worked alongside veterans in community programs. The old Shadow Vipers clubhouse became a youth center, and every morning people would see a 90-year-old woman in Diana's diner, sharing coffee and wisdom with anyone who needed it. Because Peggy Thompson had taught them all something precious, that true victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about turning them into friends. As she watched the sun rise over her changed town, a young boy approached her table. "Miss Thompson, is it true you used to fly helicopters in the war?" Peggy smiled, seeing in his eyes the same hunger for purpose she'd once seen in Havoc's. "Sit down, son. Let me tell you about real courage. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world. What would you have done in Peggy's position? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with wisdom and compassion.